Hi, I'm Jordan with Sonic Air. Thanks for joining me today. With me today is Dan Braiman from Pennsylvania Lumbermens Insurance. Dan, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Dan, you're with Pennsylvania Lumbermens. Tell us a little bit about Pennsylvania Lumbermens and what you guys do.
Pennsylvania Lumbermens has been providing insurance to the wood industry for 127 years now. We were founded by lumber folks for lumber folks. And we provide insurance coverage for everybody from sawmillers making their raw board through any kind of manufacturing in between, and as well as the retailers who are doing the frontline sales.
Wow. Yeah. So what about you specifically? How long have you been with Pennsylvania Lumbermens, and what's been your experience and exposure to the wood industry?
Yep, I've been in the insurance industry 18 years. For 17 of those years, I've been providing loss control services for the wood industry. I actually started with the Indiana Lumbermens, and we merged into Pennsylvania Lumbermens in 2014. And I've been in the field 13 years providing service directly, and in 2018, I moved into a management role for our company.
Okay, great. Well, in those 18 years, you've probably seen a lot of things change. And, Sonic Air, we're in the dust industry. And so I imagine you've probably seen some changes in the dust and hazard control and hazard analysis and the things that you guys are looking for as you try to help your customers be safer and protect their facilities and that sort of thing. So what kind of changes have you seen throughout the 18 years that you've been out there in the field and working hand in hand with these wood product manufacturers?
Yeah, the main difference has been in the understanding of wood dust and how explosive it is. So when I began servicing accounts, we were concerned about dust in the rafters, dust on the walls, things of that nature, because our thought process at the time was the reason that we saw a lot of significant severe facility fires was that this dust would allow fires to travel from place to place, kind of like a fuse throughout the facility, making the fires much bigger. What later was revealed about that was that, it's actually the case that it creates an explosion hazard. So a fire will happen, and either heat from the fire moving the air about, or in some cases, if that fire is caused by a dust explosion, it'll actually knock down dust off walls and rafters and create additional explosion events that'll just propagate throughout the facility, which is significantly worse than them just traveling like a fuse would.
Yeah, that's right. That's what unfortunately, a lot of people have learned the hard way, and we've seen tragedies and devastation kind of like that. So, just like us, I know you guys are trying to get out in front of it and try to prevent these things from happening, make sure that your customers don't have to deal with that. So where does that start with you guys? How do you guys get the ball rolling and get started with your customers, or even a prospective customer? Where does it begin?
So for our customers, we're always going to pre-inspect facilities. And we have a couple of classes of business that we write. There's the class that we refer to as our primary manufacturing folks. Those are going to be our sawmill and our pallet manufacturers that are our heaviest dust producers and have the most concerns on average from that standpoint. And then we also have a light manufacturing book, or what we call light manufacturing, even though it's oftentimes quite significant. It's just not creating dust and wood waste at the same level in general. And then also our retailers, and truthfully, even those folks, even if they're not cutting any wood, housekeeping is always the first place to go.
Okay.
It's going to be the most important.
Yeah.
Yeah, and specifically our primary folks, we have a set of what we call our primary manufacturing standards that we want them to conform to, and part of that is a written housekeeping program that needs to address dust in all areas.
So I imagine you have a checklist, some things that you're looking for when you come on site and you go through. What does that look like?
Yep, we have a fairly significant report that we fill out for that. It's going to include, what housekeeping programs are in place. What sort of electrical maintenance, machinery maintenance plans, are they keeping motors and electricals clean and clear the way they should? Obviously, wood dust is a huge concern there, because those electricals and motors can potentially be the cause of a dust explosion or just a fire as well.
Yeah.
And then, so we need our primary folks to have all of that documented, and then our lighter manufacturing folks, it'll kind of depend on the size and degree and what they're doing.
Sure. So I imagine that in your 18 years of experience, you've probably seen some pretty crazy things out in the field. So I imagine the first time that you visit a lot of facilities, that they are probably not up to the standards that you want them to be, and there's probably some opportunity and some room for improvement. So any great stories or experiences or things that maybe scared you a little bit while you were out there in the field?
So yeah, that's going to be a case by case basis, and it really just has to deal with owner and management buy-in. They need to be on board, or it's not going to go anywhere. So I've seen, I actually visited a brand new constructed sawmill that they had just had a fire with another carrier, and they wanted us to look at them to offer coverage. And they had not done really a single thing housekeeping wise since they had built this new state-of-the-art multi-level mill. So there was actually, the main portion of the mill is elevated 7 feet, so that everything can kind of be funneled down to the bottom of the mill and cleaned out that way. And in this particular case, there was a pile of dust that went up about 10 feet, so up through the great steel floor and up into the mill area, and they had just by appearance just never ever cleaned it.
Wow.
And in that particular case, we just declined to offer coverage because, if you're going to let standards fall to that degree, we can't be a party to that.
Wow. Yeah. So you talked about some of the documentation you would be looking for. So let's say someone is kind of trying to do the best they can, and you go visit the facility, and there's not this 10-foot pile of dust there, but it looks like they're doing kind of okay. What are some things on the documentation side? If I'm a mill or I'm a producer, what are you going to be looking for from me to have in place?
So we're going to want them to have documented housekeeping, documented electrical maintenance programs, and documented machinery maintenance programs. So that's going to be the outline of the procedures and what we're doing, but then also a documentation that's actually being completed on a regular basis.
Okay.
We're also, very important to us is hot work, welding or cutting of metal, which when we're working with mills that are moving around large logs, they often will have to do that, just because the damage intrinsic to moving those large heavy logs around.
Sure. We typically deal with a lot of customers that have a DHA in place. Do you look for that? Is that a key element to that? Do you get in the weeds on those as part of your inspection?
Yep. We definitely look into that. Try and see if they've done a DHA, if they're working on their DHA, what sort of changes they've made based on those findings. Because one of the big points of the DHA is to make sure that you are not only determining what areas and how combustible your dust is, but then making changes to electrical systems, housekeeping programs, any kind of fire protection systems to make it conform to what it should be to protect from that type of incident occurring.
Sure. Okay, so the documentation's in place. We've got a relationship going. Life's hunky-dory. We're making product. We're making dust. When will I see you again? Are we done? We've signed the contract. I've got insurance. I'm happy. You've got my business. Now what?
So we're going to see a minimum of one time annually.
Okay.
For our primary folks, definitely, and for the majority of our manufacturers. And then we're also available to provide services of all kinds. So we have quite a lot of loss control related material on our website, and of course in our at our home office that we can send direct. And then also we can provide other services. We provide infrared thermographic studies of electrical systems. We provide trainings for drivers, forklift drivers, any kind of staff training we can usually help out with. And in a couple of cases, we've actually supported, put together a service plan to support folks putting their DHA into place.
Great. Yeah, I was on your website earlier and I noticed there is a tremendous amount of content on there, and it's not hidden, it's not password protected, so you don't actually have to be a Pennsylvania Lumbermen's client to go there and get that information. So I would encourage anybody watching this to go check that out. It's under the loss control tab there on the Pennsylvania Lumbermen's website. A tremendous amount of good information there. So we've got this relationship going. You're coming by annually. What are you looking for when you do come by annually? Are you gonna be looking at what? Just all over the place, just broadly speaking, what are some things that you're going to be looking for when you do come by for that annual site visit?
Yeah, we're gonna look for sort of the basic standard things. You know, we're gonna look that the programs are in place, that the housekeeping's being well addressed, both from a day-to-day standpoint. There's some sort of housekeeping items that may not take place that frequently. Overhead cleaning is often one of those that may only be done a couple of times a year, which unfortunately may or may not be sufficient based on what we see on the basis of buildup in the between times. We're also going to look at what processes you have in place. Is there any kind of issue that would be a concern if you had a loss to a specific piece of equipment? Should it be more specially protected? Because if you lose that piece of equipment, you really can't function, because every piece of wood that you're working on goes through that piece of equipment. So it's going to shut down your business until you can get it restored. Things of that nature. And then sort of just broader form, what really any commercial carrier would look for, just making sure that fire protection systems are maintained, housekeeping's good, that you have basically plans in place to address each issue that would arise in the course of standard business, and that you're actually following through and getting those things done.
So one of the things I thought that was really interesting to me when we talked previously was that there are ways that you can tell if the housekeeping is being done regularly or it's been a while. Talk about that a little bit, if you will.
Yeah, so wood dust particulate dries very quickly compared to say a board of lumber, which may have to be dried through a process, or usually is dried through a process. So even if you're cutting what they call green dust or high moisture content dust, like you would at a sawmill, that dust, as it sets on surfaces around the mill, is going to dry out fairly quickly. So what we find is that if we see, say, a small pile of dust on the ground somewhere, we can take a look at it, and if that dust appears to be essentially uniform in coloration, barring different types of woods being cut at the same mill, we can tell that's today's dust. We cleaned up yesterday, that's all today's dust. But if I look into that same pile and I see layers of different colors of dust, usually getting darker, that's going to indicate to me that that's several days worth of dust that have sat on each other and dried out over different periods of time. So that cleanup's not being done.
Yeah, I see. Well, that's, I think, where we have a great partnership in that, we are trying to prevent that dust accumulation on those upper surfaces to make the housekeeping process a little bit easier. And we actually at Sonic Air have partnered with Pennsylvania Lumbermens Insurance. Dan, you want to talk just a little bit about that and kind of how we're working together and what a Pennsylvania Lumbermen's customer or potential Pennsylvania Lumbermen's customer can do to benefit from that?
Yep. So we've worked together to create a partnership to get some preferred pricing for our insureds. You know, the wood industry, dust is the huge issue. So keeping it down out of those overhead rafters is good not only from a fire perspective, but also from a life safety perspective. That kind of prevents you from having to send your employees up into the rafters to do cleanup a couple times a year, or however often you have to, based on accumulation. It just takes all of that away, so you don't have to shut down or come in on the weekend and send a couple of guys up on a man lift and have them now, as is now required, either vacuum or very carefully use water to clean
Right.
that down, since blowdowns are basically now prohibited.
Yeah. Water. Wow. That sounds like a mess.
Yep. And it can create its own concerns if it's not allowed to dry out properly on electricals or machinery underneath. It can lead to its very own problems. So really vacuuming is the best option, but
Sure.
that's also clearly the slowest option to get that sort of work done if you're talking
Yeah.
about the entire inner roof of your facility.
Sure. So something like a sonic air fan may be able to prevent you from having to go into those overhead spaces and do the vacuuming to start with. So a little bit of prevention can go a long way on something like that. So one of the questions that we get asked from time to time, actually fairly regularly, is, are these fans OSHA approved? Is my insurance company going to be okay with this? This seems like fans blowing dust around might be a bad idea. So have you been asked that, or how would you respond to that if someone asked you today, hey, insurer, are you going to approve the use of these sonic air fans?
Yep. Sonic air fans are approved per NFPA 652, which is the combustible dust standard in the National Fire Protection Agency. And NFPA is basically the go-to reference for all OSHA related guidelines. So yes, they are approved. They're safe to be used in the areas that we're looking at using them in.
Great. Okay, so I think we've covered a lot. Oh, there was one story that I want you to talk about that we talked about recently, and I want you to share with everyone else today. And that was the story about the dust collector that had the unfortunate explosion and had to blow back into the facility. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how that, even though it was a serious event, it could have been a lot worse, and talk about some of the details about that?
Yep. So yeah, we had an insured in the past. We've seen it several times over the course of my 17, 18 years in the field, where essentially dust bag houses, for most of their operating time, if they're working with machinery that's cutting dried lumber, which is the most common thing, essentially have the perfect setup with internally to have a dust explosion. So there's a lot of different controls that can be put into place for that. One that we require on any kind of significant woodworking operation that's using a dust bag house as their dust collection system is spark detection and flame suppression systems on the dirty air intake side. So hopefully that's going to detect anything hot that's trying to get into that collector that could cause that explosion.
Sure.
And douse it with water. But the other thing we're going to ask for, especially in those facilities where they're returning the clean air side back into the facility to maintain heat, usually in the wintertime, we're going to ask that they have a high-speed abort gate installed. And what that's going to do is, if something is detected within the collector, it's going to slam that from returning that air into the building to an exterior ventilation immediately.
I see.
And the concern there is that we're literally blowing that explosion right back into the building if we do have that return air and we don't have that abort gate. So we actually had a customer that we had talked about that with for many years, but at that time it was not a requirement by our company. It was just something we suggested in certain applications. Since become a requirement because of incidents like this. But they were hesitant to make the expense, to make the capital investment. at the time. And then they in fact had an explosion event in the wintertime, and it did blow back into their building and basically made a giant fireball in all the overhead rafter area right over the head of all their employees.
Wow.
Fortunately, it was a higher ceiling, and they did have a good housekeeping program in place, a good program in place that they did follow to keep those rafter spaces clean and free of dust. So it didn't become a much worse event, which it very easily could have.
Well, I can't imagine really a much better case study for housekeeping. That's really fortunate that they had been doing what they were supposed to be doing. They're doing their homework and really saved a lot of lives as a result.
Yep, absolutely. And that's one we point out to, in support of why we have these guidelines in place. Not just for the property side and even the employee safety side, but also, you have to think about liability as well. OSHA mandates that employers have to provide a safe workplace. And an argument could well be made that having a fireball over your head during work hours is not safe.
Pretty exciting and slightly hazardous, to say the least.
Right.
So, well, Dan, I know I'm grateful for the partnership we have with Pennsylvania Lumbermen's. I appreciate the work that you all do to help protect the workforce, to keep folks in the wood products industry safer and more compliant, and create ultimately more efficient workplaces as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for the work you do and your partnership. So if anyone watching today wants to get more information about you guys and what you do and the services you offer, where would they go? How do they get started?
plmins.com is our website. There's a lot of great information about us, who we are, what we do, what products and services we offer. And then, of course, as you mentioned, our loss control center is also there. We've got about 66 guides, quite a lot of signage, another 185 or so training videos that we can offer our insureds, and quite a few vendor partnerships with different companies, including Sonic Air, that provide ancillary services for our customers that are great, and all of them have agreed to special pricing for our insureds. So
that's great. That's excellent. Dan, thanks again for your time today. I know this information is helpful to me, helpful to understand the process, helpful to understand what insurance companies like yours are looking for, whether they're in the wood industry or any other industry that deals with dust, what they may be looking for when they come to your facility for an inspection, for an initial inspection or a regular audit as part of their process and part of the coverage and part of the efforts to ultimately protect your property and protect your employees and keep you safe in the workplace. So thanks again, Dan. I appreciate you joining me today. And that's all the time we have for our webinar with Pennsylvania Lumbermen's Insurance and Sonic Air. Thanks.